I knew there was something I had forgotten this morning, and that is that we have been asked if we can get a photo of folks in the congregation to send to Desert Hills Church in Arizona. Every fall for them, they have a time in their service when they pray for the other congregations that they have links with. So that would be us and the Navajo and folks at Ebenezer in Jamaica. And they have asked if we would get a photo. So at the end of the service, would you hang on just for a wee minute and come up onto the steps, and we'll get a photo of everybody and send it off to them. And they'll use that in a couple of weeks so that they can pray for us. That would be super. Thank you very much. So, over these past weeks, we have been thinking about church, about what it is, and our part in it. And this week, as I said, we're thinking about the need for evangelism, about telling people about Jesus. And the verse from the poem that we have been using is this. I have a dream. I dream of an evangelizing church where new people are seen at every service, where people expect to see friends won for Christ, where every month people come to know the Lord Jesus, where evangelists are regularly visiting the district, where young people are reaching out to their friends, where new Christians are encouraged to exploit their old network of friends, and where small groups are used for evangelism. And as we've looked at the others, you've been able to look at it and think, well, yeah, okay, I can see where that's happening. I can see where that's going on. I'm not sure that we're really good at this. I'm not saying it's not happening. I think there's a kind of reluctance and a hesitancy amongst most of us when it comes to this area. And I think it's something that we need to think about. As I said, I think actually that's partly because, we have this image in our head from years gone by of, the Bible-thumping hellfire and brimstone buddy that would be there, or the fellow with the sandwich boards out on the street and so on, and that's just not kind of where we are. But not only do we panic when we hear that word, we panic even more when somebody says, actually, you should do that. However, when you look at verse 9 of our reading, it says this: if you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. So it's possible, therefore, for somebody to say Jesus is Lord, but not believe it. But Paul goes on later to say that actually it's not right to believe it and not speak it. If you believe that Jesus is Lord, actually you have to tell people. And so in verses 14 and 15 of the reading, you see the importance of proclamation, because he goes on to say people can't respond to God. They can't call out to God if they don't know God and they don't believe in God, and they can't know God and believe in God unless somebody goes and tells them who he is and what he's done. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, that's just Paul. And Paul's always at the extreme end of things, and therefore, we can pretty much ignore Paul, So I thought we'd find out what Jesus said about it, because it's much harder to ignore Jesus than Paul. John 4:35. He's speaking to the disciples. Don't you have a saying, it's still 4 months until harvest. I tell you, open your eyes and look at the fields. They are ripe for harvest. So Jesus tells us a number of things about the harvest and about our response to it. And the first is that we are to look at the harvest. Jesus has just finished having this conversation with a Samaritan woman. The story often called the woman at the well. So they've gone there, it's the heat of the day, she's there because she's an outcast from her own village, and they know that they shouldn't be talking to each other because that's just not done. The Jews looked down, in fact they hated the Samaritans, and the Samaritans hated them right back, and you shouldn't be talking to each other, and particularly Jesus shouldn't be talking to a woman on his own and her own. The whole thing is just outrageous, and it should not be happening. But what happens is the woman responds. She has this moment when she realizes there is something totally unique, totally different about Jesus. And she goes back to her village. Sorry, I'm just watching upstairs, looking to see where we are in the notes. I'm kind of making it up a little. We'll get there, though. She's responded in faith. So she goes to the village and she says to all of these people that she knows, you've got to come and see this guy I've just met. Now, she's been married 5 times and she's living with somebody now. So coming to see the guy I've just met has a different connotation. But she says, who told me everything about myself. He knew things that he had no right to know. And so they go. And she brings them to meet Jesus. And then John says that Jesus spent 2 days there. And many people in the area believed in his message. Now imagine you're a disciple and you've come back and you've seen this happening and you're a bit disgusted, to be honest. Wondering what on earth Jesus is thinking about. I mean, they were Samaritans. They were to be treated with contempt. They didn't worship in Jerusalem like they were supposed to. They weren't even on the same wavelength as far as the Jews were concerned. And so to see Jesus speaking to what, in their opinion, is an utterly immoral woman, well, it was disgraceful. But who would have imagined that that immoral woman became the evangelist, became the catalyst by whom people came to faith in Christ? You see, often it's the people that we think are least likely to respond and to receive the message who are the first ones to come when somebody speaks to them and tells them about Jesus. Jesus, in Matthew 21, speaks to the priests at the temple and says, do you know, I'm going to tell you that the tax collectors and the prostitutes are entering the kingdom ahead of you. These temple priests should have been the first one to respond in faith to the story of Jesus. They were waiting for the Messiah, but their hearts were hardened, and so they didn't respond. They didn't move. Outwardly, they were doing all the right things. Outwardly, they looked great. They lived proper, respectful, good lives, but inside, they were unreceptive to the truth of the gospel. And yet here Jesus sees these Samaritans and they were ripe like harvest. The Living Bible puts it this way in John chapter 4, verse 35. It says this: do you think the work of harvesting will not begin until the summer ends 4 months from now? Look around you. Vast fields of human souls are ripening all around us and are ready now for reaping. If the devil can get us as Christians to put off our evangelism and keep putting off, then he'll have accomplished his purpose. I wonder if you've been saying for some time, oh, I should speak to. Maybe tomorrow. Oh, well, no, maybe tomorrow. I can't do tomorrow because, well, I've got that on. And well, no, maybe next week. Man, next week's a wee bit, no, we need to think about that a bit more. And you put it off and you put it off and you put it off. One of the tactics that the devil uses is simply the 2 words, not now. Not now. Another time would be better. So here's another few suggestions that the devil uses to put us off speaking and harvesting. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not good enough. I'm not spiritual enough to tell other people about Jesus. I don't know the Bible well enough. What if they ask me a question and I don't know the answer? Then even if I did, I might say the wrong thing, and that would be even worse because that would really put them off. And think about what's just happened in this story in John chapter 4. All these Samaritan folks had come to Jesus through the witness of a brand new believer. She didn't know anything. She didn't know anything. She didn't have it all sorted. She'd never been to college or university. She'd never studied. And yet God used her and her story to impact other people. She had no credibility in the community. Who was she to speak about Jesus? Well, she was someone who had encountered Jesus. She was somebody who had experienced the presence of Jesus affecting her life. And her story and her method of evangelism was simple. Tell people what had happened. Tell people what God had done for her. And that's what we should do too. Doesn't mean that you're perfect. You're not setting yourself up as the perfect example other people should follow. Because none of us are perfect. We're all still works in progress. The second thing that the devil says is, well, they're not interested. We assume that other people aren't interested. They're having too much fun and doing things the way they want. They would know what to hear. No, probably best just to leave them just now. We'll get into them later because I don't see how they would be interested at all. The thing is, there are vast numbers of people in the world who are interested, but they simply don't know where to go. They simply don't know who to talk to. And they need somebody to respond. And even if they don't respond immediately, if we've spoken to them, if we've planted a seed at the right time when they need it, they'll know where to go. And God will use that in their lives. So the seeds that we plant now might not bear fruit immediately, but we need to plant them anyway. Psalm 14, verse 1 says, "The fool says in his heart, there is no God." The world tells us we are stupid to believe in God, but God says it the other way around. Says the fool says in his heart, there's no God. Only a fool would come to that conclusion. All of creation screams the existence of God. Every human cell, our fingerprints, everything about us unique screams the existence of God. Every shining star that we see at this time of the year coming into the glory in the sky screams the existence of God. And the fool says in his heart, no, that can't be true. Ecclesiastes says at the end of chapter 3, God has put eternity in the human heart. God created us for eternity, to be with him for eternity, and it's still in there. And there's something in human beings that the world can't satisfy. And we need to tell them that it's Jesus. Conversations don't have to be manufactured. We all get conversations. We all get opportunities. People have opinions about most things. I know you all do. Most of us have an opinion, can give an opinion on most things. And people are quite happy to share our opinions and our thoughts. So why not just ask them, why don't you come to church? And it's okay, whatever the answer, because you're starting a conversation. You're starting to engage. You're starting where people are. You're not expecting them to be way over here when actually they're here. The third thing is wait until you get your own problems solved. So, I've got this that I need to sort out. I've got that I need to sort out. But actually, we're never going to get it sorted out. None of us ever. Because there's always more stuff that we've got to sort out. Sanctification is an ongoing process. It doesn't just happen. You don't just become a Christian one day and the next day you're perfect. It doesn't work like that. It's an ongoing process. We've always got things to sort out, and there's always going to be things for us to sort out. And if we wait until then, we're never going to speak to anybody about anything. God is going to be working on me until the day I die. That's the truth. And if we don't speak, who's going to lose out? Who's going to suffer? Your family member? Your neighbor? Your work colleague? And it's not that we're preaching ourselves. We're not setting ourselves up as the standard. We're preaching Jesus. Saying at our day with the elders there, one of the things that was always above the door or a pulpit in a gospel hall was, we preach Christ crucified. That's what we're doing. We're telling other people about Jesus and what he's done. Christ is the one who can help us, and Christ is the one who can help them. We can always find something else that needs to happen as an excuse for not sharing Jesus with others. As soon as I feel less stressed, when I've got over this particular issue that I'm struggling with at the moment, when I get my bills and my finances sorted, then I'll work on it then. Or right now, my family needs me. These are all proper things that you need to attend to. But it should be a both and rather than an either or. I'll work on this issue that I'm dealing with, and at the same time, I'll speak to people. There might be somebody going through this same issue. I could maybe speak to them. I'll work on paying my bills and taking care of my finances and my family. But I'll also declare the goodness of God as I'm doing it. So this statement, there are still 4 months and then comes the harvest, that was a colloquialism. That was their way of saying, not yet, or we'll get to it later at the right time. And Jesus says, no, now is the time. The harvest is ready now. In Luke chapter 10, we get the same story, Luke 10, 1-4. After this, the Lord appointed 72 others, and he sent them 2 by 2 ahead of him to every town and place where he was about to go. And he told them, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to go and send workers into his harvest field. Go, I'm sending you out like lambs amongst wolves. Don't take a purse or a bag or sandals, and don't greet anyone on the road. The harvest is great or plentiful. Well, if that was true in Jesus' day, let's just think. In Jesus' day, it's reckoned there were about 200 million people in the world. In the whole world, 200 million. By about 1850, the mid-1850s, they reckon there was 1 billion. So it took 1,800 years to get to that. By 1974, there were 4 billion. And now we're approaching 8. If the harvest was plentiful in Jesus' day, it's not got any smaller. Jesus says the same thing in Matthew 9:37 when he sent out the 12. He says there's no shortage of harvest. There's plenty of harvest. And what we have to ask is, are there people in our circle of influence who would respond, who might receive, who might listen to the message if we presented it to them? And they might not respond immediately, but they might respond even if it takes time. I think there is a need that people have to connect with God, and that needs to be explained to them. So if we're holding back because we think nobody wants to hear it, or if we're holding back because we think the time's not quite right, then we need to hear Jesus' words to these disciples in his day. The harvest is plentiful. The harvest is not the problem. So what's the problem? Well, Jesus identifies it there in Luke chapter 10. The laborers are few. The harvest is there, but there's not enough people actually going out to harvest. There may be a lot of people in the world who claim to be Christians. There may be a lot of people here this morning. But the laborers are few. The people who are willing to inconvenience themselves and work are few. Those willing to put their job on the line for him are few. Those willing to be marginalized for testifying about him are few. Those willing to pay the price of closer scrutiny are few. And there are loads of us who can craft a good excuse. But the problem is a shortage of labourers. Sometimes we try to blame the others. We say, well, there's a lack of people receiving. They don't want to receive. They don't want to hear. But actually, the labourers are few. So Jesus gives us the solution. And the next thing that he tells us to do is to pray. Pray the Lord of the harvest to send labourers into his harvest. You see, when I pray about that, I tend to pray that other folk will be receptive, that other folk will be open to listen, that other folk will do, that other folk. What I don't do is say, help me to speak. Give me the words to say. Use me as a labourer in your harvest. I want to put it all on them. And I think it's okay at times to ask God to soften somebody's heart. But not just that. We've been told that we are supposed to go and to make disciples, to preach the gospel. And when God makes that call real in our hearts, it ignites a zeal in us that we want to go and do it. And so respond to that call to tell people who it is they're supposed to believe in and what it is they're supposed to do in order to live for him. Those verses in Romans chapter 10, 14 and 15, how can they call on the one they've not believed, and so on. That's not about becoming a professional preacher. It's about hearing the call of God in your life and responding to it. It's about experiencing the Lord and sharing our experience of him with other people. And maybe there's a problem. Maybe we don't have anything to share because maybe we don't spend any time with him. Maybe we never open the Bible, and maybe we never pray, therefore we've got nothing to talk about. Jesus sends his disciples. He sent them then, and he still does today. He sent these 70 folk off, and he said, it won't be easy because I'm sending you like lambs among wolves. And the people you're going to, they're not always going to behave well. But some of them will respond. And so when we are sent, when we are called, we need to remember that it's the Lord who sends us, and he's promised that he would be with us. He'll defend us when we need defending, because he knows that the harvest is there and has to be brought in. It is a journey of faith. He says the money will be supplied as you need it. The homes will be open to you as you need them. Some people might reject you, but that's their problem, not yours. You just keep doing what I've sent you to do. You keep healing the sick, and you keep preaching the good news. You keep sharing the message of the kingdom, and I will be with you every step of the way. It's like Isaiah, when he saw this vision of God, and God said to him, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Isaiah couldn't do anything but go, me, send me. I mean, I can just imagine him jumping up and down there going, me, you know. But that's what happens when you have this vision, this call from God. So we begin by praying for laborers. And as we do that, actually, sometimes what happens is we find ourselves laboring. We find that we have this desire to go and to speak to others and to reach others. The Lord of the harvest is the one who directs us, and he'll lead us and he'll guide us and he'll keep us as we go. When we've spent time with Jesus, we get his perception of the harvest. I suppose that's a question that we need to ask. Do we view other people the way Jesus does? And that's not an easy question to answer. If we've been hurt by people, it's hard to see them as somebody, nice, kind, compassionate, caring, because they've hurt us. If we've been rejected by somebody, it's hard to see them as Jesus would see them. Next time you find yourself sitting in a restaurant, have a look round. And wonder to yourself, how would Jesus see these folks? What would he do? What would he say? How would he respond in this place? Because if I look round at other people and I perceive them as uninterested or unimportant or not worth my time, that will affect what I do. But if I see them as Jesus sees them, sheep without a shepherd, lost, then it just might make me strike up a conversation with somebody. And so, the final question is, are you and I willing to look at the harvest through Jesus' eyes? Are you and I willing to pray for laborers and to volunteer our services? Are you and I willing to go and harvest? If we are, he's promised to be with us. And that alone guarantees fruitfulness. Amen.